I have a test working the way that I want. I create the resident, I create the scheduled activity, I have a resident, and the resident attends a scheduled activity. That's the action, the act step of clicking on one of the residents' names from the activity list. And my assertion is just checking to see that those two values, the IDs, are being input into this pivot table, which I'm calling attendance records. This model has an attends method on it now, and the attends method, as we see, accepts the scheduled activity, and within it calls on the relationship. So this is just within the Laravel documentation, the belongsToMany relationship on a pivot table, and I have named the pivot table something other than the way Laravel would default in describing that. Laravel would have done a resident underscore scheduled activity as the pivot table. So this is how, according to the documentation, you go ahead and rename it what you want. And the two fields that I'm wanting to be input are coming from this method when you call on the toggle method. So there's a toggle, an attach, and a detach method that you can apply, and that's all within here. So attaching and detaching in the many-to-many relationships, and toggle. You can toggle the associations. All of the information is here and explained very well in the documentation. So what I'm trying to do is, by calling the toggle, I'm allowing Laravel to check that the record is either in the database or not. If it's not, this action, attends, will insert it because it knows that relationship, and I'm bringing in a resident model and a scheduled activity model, and that relationship being established will go ahead and allow for that record with both of those individual IDs for the resident and scheduled activity to be inserted. The other test that I'm running, the user can uncheck, in essence just runs the attends method once, and then checks that the values are there just like the first one, and then runs that method again so that it's looking for and identifying the value already in the table and will remove that value from the table. So just real quick to prove that I can make both of these break. In this first one, because we know that the resident ID when there's nothing in the database, and the scheduled activity ID when there's nothing in the database will be 1. If I change these to say 2 and any other value and then run it, save, we get the failure because it's asserting that the resident ID of 2 and the scheduled activity ID of 4 are in the database, but it's only finding the 1 and 1. And that's what we know we set up and insert via our arrange and act phases. So I return that to the way it was. We run it, we get the same successful response. And then to try to break this one, a user can uncheck the residents. So I went ahead and placed some IDs in here. So we know the resident ID of 3 should be associated with the scheduled activity of 2. We run the method, we get that. So let's break this just to prove that, say 4 and 6. Running this single model, or running this single test, we're looking for 4 and 6. We're asserting that we're seeing 4 and 6, but we only found 3 and 2 because that's what we had created originally. And now we put that back. So we know that that's what's making it into the database. And then what we want to do is confirm that it's being removed, and that's what assert database is missing does. So we know at this point when we've asserted that 3 and 2 are in there, and so let's comment this out because we're expecting not to see it. Okay, so we were still having the 3 and 2, the resident ID of 3, the scheduled activity ID of 3 in the database, and we were expecting not to see that, but we know that it's still there. When we run the toggle method again, so our attends method goes to that toggle method that Laravel provides in looking over the database and determining if a record is there or not. We run that again, and we get the passing test. So we know that this is being called again, finding the record, removing it, and we're expecting not to see it, and we do not see it. Okay, I think I have the logic in place for being able to toggle on and off. Now I need to go as a next step, one of many next steps besides building other interfaces and moving on with this application, is to go ahead and implement that functionality on the front end to when I do click on a name, that it is indeed maintaining that state here on the front end, as well as going ahead and utilizing those methods on the model on the back end that we've just proven work. So test-driven development, I'm trying to stick with it. It's fun, it's interesting. The concepts, the newness of the concepts for me are a little bit of a pain, but I appreciate the process.